Welcome to Breaking Bias on Broadway and Beyond with Colette Luckie and Dr. Heather Sanders, where they answer the elusive question, why is cultural competence critical in today's multicultural environment, and what are the measurable outcomes and benefits of sustainable allyship? Ready to become aware of, address, and eventually break our cultural biases? Well, let's get into the show. Here's part 2 of our The History of DEI conversation.
There's a Yale study, I think it was Yale, where they wanted to study teacher bias. And so they had several cohorts of teachers come into a space, and they asked the teachers to look for negative behavior. And their technology tracked where the teachers were looking.
Okay.
And what demographic do you think they were looking at?
Oh, yeah. Black people of color.
Black boys.
Yeah. In particular, yeah.
In particular. And so I think the thought process is, or the determination was, that if you look for something somewhere where you're
going to find it.
You're going to find it.
Yes,
And so
yes.
you mentioned something that's a very interesting concept that doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot, but this idea of tracking.
Yes.
So I think a lot of times folks disregard their bias because of what they believe to be factual. Well, I did observe you coming in late 3 days in a row. Okay, but did you notice
Sally came in
4 days
in a
late
row.
in a row?
Right. And why
No,
is
because you weren't looking.
Right, exactly.
You weren't looking.
And I would venture to say you were looking.
You weren't looking. Okay.
You're not that oblivious.
Okay.
You are not that oblivious.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's being able to have those conversations in a non-defensive way, right?
Ooh, that will.
And that, again, that's but I think that, why we've been successful at it is because we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
Using our own experiences, our own biases, our own, perspectives on, other people and others, and how those, others act even around us.
Absolutely.
So I think there's, just a lot there. And obviously, we focus somewhat, on Broadway and that industry, and a lot, more, to tell around that, because I one of the things, reasons why this came to me is to do this whole thing is because within the short 4 years, Broadway has had such a major cultural shift behind the curtain.
Yes.
There's so many wonderful programs that are out there. We're going to have some of those guests on. I mean, and these are the leaders on Broadway, the producers who have decided, you know what, it is more than training.
Yes.
Cultural competence is just the groundwork. It really is around allyship. And, we push them to look at allyship. Like, okay, let's define what allyship, what can you do from an allyship perspective? Now that you understand your own personal bias, cultural competence, now what are you going to do about it to create an equitable, Broadway, right? An equitable environment, and, how are you going to sustain that? And so, I'm really happy that, several shows like Hamilton and Hadestown and, Mean Girls and Book of Mormon. I mean, there's just been a slew of, Broadway shows that have decided we are really going to make a change on this. And, I honestly believe oftentimes, Broadway's a very busy place. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money that is lost, that is not made. Shows. A lot of people think, okay, these tickets are $400. There's a hand over. They're making money hand over foot. Yeah, but they probably put, probably twice as much money into creating these productions.
Absolutely.
So it takes years for that to recoup. But for these shows to say, regardless of what it costs, we are going to think differently about how we operate. Wow, we haven't been fair. And now we want to be fair, and not just fair for, for optics,
right,
or for performance, but we want to keep this going, and we want to continue to have these conversations, even though there have been a lot of social and political kind of reneging, the companies that have, okay, well, there's a backlash against DEI, so let's, stop.
Distance ourselves, right.
And others who've had to pause because of legal ramifications, and others who have said, okay, you know what, we're just going to call it something else, but we are still moving forward, fast forward,
Right.
on, some of these initiatives. So I think, having some of these guests on the show and come and tell their story, not only their personal story as leaders in particular industries, again, not only on Broadway, but we work a lot in academia and in
Sure.
city and, city, state, governmental
Government
agencies.
Certainly higher ed.
Yeah, higher ed, obviously Fortune 500, 100 companies. So, I think having some of these folks come and just kind of tell their story about what the impact of DEI has been on them personally as well as on the organization will be really interesting for people to listen to.
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that we really wanted to do, and I really appreciate the organicness of this conversation, was to really sort of define what DEI is, and I think we've definitely hit on it. But one of the things I just wanted to add to the conversation about the equity of it
Okay.
is, again, that unlearning that has to happen, and some of the messages that we're taught, and one of them is, the golden rule. Y'all heard about the golden rule and learned it: treat others as you want to be treated. But that's a self-centered way of engaging with others. Equity is the adoption of the platinum rule. I'm going to treat others the way they want to be treated or need to be treated. And that's what I appreciate about equity, and that's the difference between equity and equality, which was the more popular term post Civil War. I'm sorry, post civil rights, right?
Yeah.
So I think the commitment to continue learning, right? Like even shifting language is, a sign of that commitment to continue to learn. And I mean, terms do change all the time. And I think rather than becoming frustrated and disengaging, I think it's exciting, to just continue to learn and evolve and understand why certain terms don't work anymore.
Exactly. And in order for that to happen, and we just did a workshop yesterday at the La Jolla Playhouse, and part of the workshop was speaking on psychological safety.
Yeah.
And I think certainly, helping people first of all, create psychological safety so everyone on either side can express. Right? People who are, maybe find themselves, a minority in a dominant, situation. Do they have the language? Do they have the courage? Right? Are they given the empowerment, the license to say, hey, what you said made me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And here's why. But that safety has to be created by management or organizations that say, okay, tell us when we are stepping on your toe, when we are said something that is uncomfortable for you, or hey, do I have the license to ask you, hey, what do you think? Right? And so having that type of open kind of environment where both sides feel comfortable engaging one another in dialogue or querying, what's right, what's wrong, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, I think is, very, very important in creating that, that equity.
Absolutely. And it really is the foundation of the inclusion part, right? Having people feel included in, first of all, being invited to advocate for themselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that's number one. And then
feeling like they won't be retaliated against for speaking up.
Absolutely, right? I mean, the foundation of psychological safety really is about that ability to give feedback, ask questions, be curious, without fear of retribution, retaliation, or some sort of negative consequence.
Correct.
Right? And it's one thing to say you can tell me, and it's another thing to actually mean it.
Correct.
And to allow people to be able to share in a way that does not threaten their well-being by doing so.
And that's on both sides, right? Because how many, white leaders have we spoke to that said, well, I'm afraid to ask that question.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Is it okay, to say X, Y, Z, or how should I phrase this? And, we do a lot of work around communication, strategy, and okay, here's how you want to, present and ask.
Right, giving and receiving feedback.
Right,
for sure.
Exactly. And what that means with a cultural lens, right? That if you're giving feedback, think about, that person's identity. Right. And not that you have to know everything, but you need to be aware of what something sounds like to a white employee versus one that is from a Latin background, or an Asian background, or a woman, or someone who's from a trans community.
Exactly.
Right. You have to think about that. But the only way you can think about that is to know about it. Right? Otherwise, you're not going to have the words. You're not going to know the difference of what may be an insult or some type of underlying trigger that you're thinking, oh, I just said dandelion, but, it may, but, that word dandelion may mean something.
Yeah.
And it's not to make people paralyzed where you can't, say and think and do, but, you may, as we showed that video, the TikTok video of the company that gave the African-American employee, it was his 1-year, 2-year anniversary, and they gave him a branch with cotton with cotton on it. I mean, not thinking. Now, I don't know the person. I don't know whether that was a conscious message or a subconscious, or subconscious, it doesn't matter. He took it as, okay, you're giving, what are you alluding to?
Yeah.
You know the history of slavery in this country, and you're going to give me a stalk with cotton balls on it? And then you had a story, too, about your mother's.
I did. I won't name the university, but my mother attended a brunch, I believe, for Black History Month at a PWI, predominantly white institution. And I suppose the brunch was to just celebrate Black students, Black excellence, maybe in the institution, I don't know. But unfortunately, that good or well-intentioned effort was sort of overshadowed, by the fact that all of the centerpieces were cotton stocks.
Right.
And, I think the students felt a variety of things. And, of course, this is, my mother telling me this story. Hi, Mom. The students felt many different ways, but one of them was just fatigue of having to tell you this, right? And then also, and this was many years ago, but also having to go back and forth with someone because they need to express to you that no, cotton stocks are in right now.
Right.
You may not know that, but cotton is as centerpieces is the thing.
Right.
So no, we weren't thinking about slavery, and it's like,
okay.
Right.
And even if it wasn't, even if cotton happens to be in, this is the gift of, the year.
Right.
You still have to think about the historical context of certain things.
I don't care if it was on Oprah's favorite things. It wasn't our favorite thing.
Right.
And I certainly don't want to come, okay, again, context. Might it have been different if it was at an HBCU and not a PWI? Right. Might it have been different if it was just a student council brunch, a student brunch, a council brunch, right? Well, that would never happen at a HBCU, but
exactly.
And maybe if it was just a brunch for just students, and then there were, happened to be a few students of color or Black students, right? But the fact that it was like all of these things working together,
correct,
and then sort of the justification or the defensiveness when the students said,
of course,
this is offensive. Right.
And then the 3Ds, kind of come in. People start to deflect, deny, defend, right, or, any of the other Ds, come into it, and it doesn't matter. Right. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. And I think the other side of that is, which is a really pain point, is oftentimes, things like that happen. These micro aggressions happen. so consistently that I think oftentimes people of color have just weathered them.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and
Oh, yeah.
but then that builds up also. I mean, you know, there's a limit to that. And I think not being able to say it or not feeling empowered to speak to it or to have to debate someone whether or not, you know, okay, so it's in, but it's not, it was inappropriate, regardless of that. It's such a, it's a drag.
It is.
It's a drag.
It is. And I think not only did we do ourselves a disservice by sort of just swallowing a whole lot, you know, of course, this is in no way to disparage, you
Yes,
know, the
yeah.
ancestors or elders who
Right.
have taken on a lot
Yes,
in
have had
order to
to.
just
Yeah.
have a livelihood. But
Yeah.
I think not only did we do ourselves a disservice, we did white folks a disservice.
Right.
Because now it feels like this attack out of nowhere. And it's like, no, this is what we've always thought.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you're just now hearing about
Yes,
it because
yes.
it's become more acceptable to share.
And to to
Exactly.
educate you
Exactly.
around, you know,
Right.
some of these social, you know, kind of nuances and missteps,
Yeah,
you know, frankly.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that, you know, certainly, you know, we have our stories we can tell
Oh,
in the
yeah.
framework of, you know, bias, and then, you know, again, having our clients, you know, share their story and the impact
Yeah.
that, you know, being able to be in a forum where they could be empowered themselves to make
Absolutely.
a change. I mean, that's a huge organizational shift. And
Absolutely.
typically it has to come from people that are at the very top of an organization
Yeah.
that are going to not just have it as a temporary, seasonal
Yeah.
kind of program,
Right.
but that it's going to be integrated into every aspect of the organization. So that's everything from recruiting to performance management to marketing to communication to, you know, employee engagement to community advocacy. I mean, unless, you know, that whole systems approach, it's typically where we come in. We're like,
Absolutely.
okay, we can come in and do a little 3-hour training. Nobody's heart or mind or behavior is probably going to be changed with that.
As soon as you walk out,
Yeah.
you've already began to
Yeah.
forget about
Yes.
even a great experience in a workshop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's the follow through.
It's the follow-through,
and
yeah.
the commitment to
Yeah.
continue. Absolutely.
Correct. It has to be, you know, integrated into every facet of the organization through every
Absolutely.
single department. There has to be something that is constantly reminding people of who they'd like to be,
Yeah.
right? Rather than the myth of who they think they are, right? And again, I think it's just part of the human experience and the human journey if people are willing to participate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Thank
thanks.
you.
We did it, girlfriend.
All right.